Well, good morning. Thank you to those of you who are here or who come and join us slightly later. And thank you to those of you watching the recording and going through it in your own time. My name is Eleanor. I have the privilege of working with Mandy and Rita, and they've asked me to come in and deliver a session today for you around building team culture, effectively commencing the conversation. So we only have a couple of hours together today. So what I'm really going to do is give you almost like a bit of a tappers board of different things you can play with and go through. And what it will do is give you the opportunity to look at how your team culture is going and how you might want to go about building that from where you're at now. Just making sure my clicky thing is working. But before I launch into talking with you, I want to begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land which all of us are meeting on. So I'm on the beautiful Gubbi Gubbi land of the Sunshine Coast, which is what is pictured there in the background. One of the very few rare moments I was actually up for sunrise. And I want to pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. And obviously I extend that respect to any and all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people either here with us live today or who might be tuning in afterwards. So thank you for joining us. So three things we're going to cover today. I'm just going to move some things around my screen. There you go. Then I can see my chat as well. So we're going to cover three things in our short time today. So we're going to look at introducing an introduction to building teams and team culture. Make sure you've got either a notebook with you or your computer, however you prefer to take notes. I will make sure that Mandy and Rita get a copy of the key slides from this. So please don't feel like you need to scribble everything down. If that's how your brain works, go for it. But I will make sure you get a copy of these. And really, I have an expectation, normally when we're live together, of engaging, asking questions. So if you're here with me in the chat, I'd ask you just to use the chat to do that for today. And really use it as an opportunity to reflect on your own practice and where things are at within your business. Now, I'm actually going to skip over the introduction slide because I've been talking to people who are already here. And those of you who aren't here, you won't be able to tell me a little bit about you. So we will come to that at a later date. But ladies and gentlemen, fasten your seatbelts. We have a lot to get through in a short period of time. Please use the chat if I'm going too fast on a particular point or you want to ask a question. I'll do my absolute best to get to any questions that I can. Failing that, flick an email to Mandy and Rita. They can get in contact with me. Or seek me out. I'm really happy to take questions outside of the time that you're looking on this too. My intention is never to kind of leave you with part of a piece of information or to not be clear about how you might want to implement it in your circumstances. So feel free to do that. But other than that, click the seatbelt on and we will launch into it. So, question I have in the chat first. I'll give you just, if you're watching separately, then just grab your pen and piece of paper and jot down your thoughts too. But what do you think is important for building an exceptional team? So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes just to share any thoughts or write down your own thoughts. So we've got communication is important in building an exceptional team. Absolutely agree. Respect is important. Employing the right people, yeah, so we've got the right fit of cultural people. Listening, always a good other side, a good other side of that communication button. Some of the things that I included in there for me were around being able to work together in a really healthy environment, clear channels of communication, understanding what other people do, those kind of things. We've got being flexible, yeah. Ensuring people have the right job that they work well in. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know about you, but I've certainly been in jobs in the past that I've gone, I could do really much better if I was in a different role. And sometimes it's being with a different group of people. Yeah, don't teach monkeys to swim or fish to climb trees, which I'm a really visual person. I don't know about you, but that conjures up a wonderful image. Absolutely. So I'm going to share with you a model that I developed, and you're welcome to use it, just as with all good things, credit it where it's due. As we go through, I'll be sharing some work from other people too. So again, I just ask that if you use their work that you credit them to. It's all at the top of the slides. But I want to share my thoughts with you about 3 pillars to me that make up an exceptional team. And then what we're going to do today is actually just focus mainly on one of them with the 2 hours that we've got, and then maybe opportunity in the future to delve deeper into some of the others. So as with all good diagrams, there is a lovely Venn diagram made up of pretty circles. The first one that I think is really key, and we touched on some of that there in the chat, is our people. So who do we have within our team? We want to know what makes them tick. We want to know how we get the best out of them as individuals. We want to know about ourselves because we're part of that team as well. So what makes me tick? How do I get the best out of me? What are my strengths? How do I best communicate? What are my values? Those kind of conversations, as well as the people who are working either under us, alongside us, or who may be our supervisors as such as well. The second, sorry, my screen is all over the place today. I apologize in advance. So one of my favorite quotes from Gallup, which I think is really relevant to building any form of team, whether it's a work one or even kind of your volunteer teams as well. So please feel free to switch out sometimes the word employees and volunteers. But employees need to know that someone's concerned about them as people first and employees second. So we're not cogs in a wheel, we're actually human beings that come to work that form part of the team. We have really specific roles maybe, we have our specific strengths, but we want people on the whole to know us as human beings. Like, I want to be known as Eleanor, not the girl who does blah, blah, blah. Like, I want people to really get to know me if I'm going to work really well in a team with people. I'm going to abandon the clicky thing. Okay, so the second one we have on there, and I'm going to skip philosophy for a second and talk to you about my third pillar, because we're going to spend most of our day focusing on philosophy. So the third pillar in here is purpose. So as a team, my less polite version of this is, why the heck, insert any swear word you like instead, are we here? Like, what the hell are we doing here? It sounds like a bit of an existential question, but what is our deeper level for existing? How does that shape our team? We want to be clear about our purpose for us, but we want to be clear about our purpose for other people as well. So I'd like to introduce you to a little friend of mine. So this is, we'll call him Mr. Bird because he's a bird, but he really reflects us as an individual. So when we're looking at our purpose, we want to be clear about our why. So some of you will be familiar with Simon Sinek's work. This is based on his concept of the nested why, and you'll see why the nested in a second. But it's really key that we're clear on why we're doing the work. Like, when you go to work day in and day out, what's the purpose for you as an individual? Then there's another layer to that, hence the nested. So our bird appears in the nest. The nest then forms, what's the purpose of our team? What's the why of our team? And I'll give you an example of how it all works together in a second. But my individual why as Eleanor needs to fit within the why of my team. We don't want them clashing. We don't want them competing. They don't need to be perfectly aligned, but to have a good team that's going, all pulling in the same direction, we want a really clear sense of, why is our team existing? What are they doing? What are they here to do? And then finally, our team, us in our team, which is us in our nest, sits within a wider organization of the tree. So why does your organization exist? What is the real deep meaning of your organization? So when you're going through this, and maybe when you're reflecting on it later, I'd encourage you to think of all three. And there is, of course, all the other teams that form part of your organization as well. You can tell my design skills aren't up to much, and thank God for Canva, because if I had to draw this, we'd all be stuffed. But for me, I used to work in an organization that tracked missing sex offenders around the world and put them in prison. Very different from the environment we're talking about here. but it was always a really good example to me of my purpose. So for me as the individual, so as a single bird in the tree, my why was always about making a difference to children who would never know what might face them otherwise. My team, so the nest, the purpose of that team was to locate offenders and to put them in prison. So you can see how my why tallied up very nicely with the team why. And then finally, as an organization, it was actually their motto, which was making every child matter everywhere. And that encompassed the whole organization. So we had all our different teams in there. So maybe we had people from education, we had people from technology, all of them with their own whys, but all connected to their individual teams and then all connected to their wider organization. So really important to think about why you're there. Sometimes we find for our teams when we're operating, and it can be worth having these conversations with the people around you, that some of the clashes are because maybe our why isn't finding space to work out within the team, or there might be clashes for my individual why and the team why. Now, that doesn't mean we ditch it and we just run off, but it's about having those really healthy, robust conversations that say, hey, this is something that's really important to me. So remember the Gallup quote, like people want to know about us as employees first, which includes our purpose. Like, why do you come to work? Why have you chosen, of all the places you could work, why have you chosen to be part of that team in that place? So I appreciate that's a really quick skip through on that, but I want to come and focus on this one, on our philosophy. And we're going to play in a little bit more depth around this today. So our philosophy is about the way that we work. So how do we work together to bring the best out of everyone and get the best results? Because ultimately our organization wants the best results from us, but also as people, we want to be able to deliver the best results, to feel that we're really part of that exceptional team. Now, I'm just going to caveat that I didn't use the words high-performing team in here. That's very much a reflection of my choice of language, but we are talking about the same kind of things. Now, the reason I ditched high performance is, for me, it can have a lot of connotations around stress and pressure and striving and pushing and driving hard, and it being focused around results. Whereas there's so much more to an exceptional team than that, as we've looked here. So how people are treated, being able to really connect with their sense of why and deliver a really deep sense of value. So that's why we're playing with the terminology around exceptional teams, but feel free to interchange them if it works better for you in that sense. So our philosophy, the way that we work and how we work together to bring the best out of everyone to absolutely get the best results. When we have all three working together, then we have our exceptional, or if you prefer, our high-performing teams. So let's look at the way that we work. I'm going to introduce you to another friend of mine. We'll call him Mr. Fish because he's a fish and I'm not very creative with names. So doesn't necessarily look like it right here, but he is a fish in water. So I use this to explain culture. So there's a story, and I can't remember off the top of my head, I'm really sorry, the name of the gentleman that first came up with this story. But Mr. Fish, Mr. Old Fish, is swimming along in the water. Two younger fish come towards him and he says to them, hey, the water's great, isn't it? And the two younger fish kind of, yeah, it's great, swim off, turn to each other and go, what the heck is water? This, to me, perfect example of culture. Now, when you look at this beautiful, stunning, look, it's probably deadly because everything on this side of the world appears to be fish. It doesn't look to me like it's in anything. I promise you it's in water. I promise you I didn't take it out. But water is very much like culture. Like, it's there all the time. It surrounds us. It very much impacts whether we thrive or we don't. Like, if we change up this water for that stunning fish, it's probably going to kill them if we put too much toxins in there, if we make it cloudy, if we add too much salt, if we take too much salt out, whatever that means. But water, like culture, needs to be optimal for people to thrive. I'm sure you know this yourselves. I'm sure we've all got examples of times when we've worked in cultures that are, should we say, less than desirable, where we've all had particularly negative experiences. And my hope for all of you here as well is that you've had the opposite of that, where you've had a culture that has been phenomenal, where you know that you thrive, you know that you're accepted and you can grow where you are. But how do we define what that is? It's like asking a fish to define what water is. So the aim of coming around some of the philosophy stuff today is to really focus in on that and start to try and form some language perhaps around what our culture looks like and how we want to build that culture. We have literally two choices. For those of you who, like me, like to find the middle option, you don't have one. It's option 1 or option 2. So when we're building our philosophy and culture, it's one of two things. We're either getting a culture that we are building by design, or we end up the culture by default. There's no middle ground. We can't partly be designing it, because ultimately we're still going to get a culture that happens by default. Same applies to your leadership, and I'll talk to you in a couple of sessions time around leadership, but the same principle applies. You either become the leader that you want to be by designing that, or by default you'll become a kind of leader, which might not be the choice that you want to make. Frame it another way. We either have our leadership by choice, or we have it by chance, or our culture by choice and our culture by chance. So we can be deliberate and intentional, or just leave our culture as an afterthought or a byproduct. So when we're building our teams, when we're recruiting, when we're training, when we're having our professional development days, when we're coaching people within our teams, when we're leading them, any of those things to me apply in this model. Are we getting what we want because we're being deliberate about it? Or are we getting it as an afterthought or a byproduct? So if you think about the environment that you might be in now, I wonder which one it is for you. I wonder if you have played an active part in deliberately building the culture that you want, or whether now that I've framed this to you, there's a little bit of a thought going, actually, it's a bit of an afterthought. I'm not really thought about defining the water around me. Now, I know that some of you may have more influence, or may feel that you have more influence than others around the culture and the environment that you're in. But what I would say is, when we all stop and take responsibility, we can take responsibility for that immediate culture around us. If we're all doing the same, then we'll get the culture that we want to have. Yeah, so we've experienced both a good culture and a bad one. It's a bit scary. We need to live a little bit more by design. And I think it isn't until we come on sessions like this or have moments like this together and someone else points out and goes, are you actually being deliberate about what you've got around you? It's the, oh shit moment. Am I actually, like, I might complain. I know I've been in a job where I'm like, I hate the culture here. It's awful. And I quite frankly have bitched and moaned about it a lot. And then I left that job, and then I discovered this kind of work, and I was like, wow, what would have been different if I had taken responsibility for making some shifts? I can't change everyone else, but I definitely could have made design the culture around me better. So just in the chat again, excuse me, have a think about this. What is it that you want to intentionally design? And I want you to keep focused specifically on your teams and your cultures. That's what we're talking about today. So what do you want to intentionally design to shape the way that we interact with each other? While you answer that, I'm just going to stop screen sharing for a second because my screen's gone wonky. So take a couple of minutes, scribble down your thoughts and share in the chat. What do we want to intentionally design about how we interact with each other? Fabulous. So knowing that everyone has a voice, having open conversations with each other, yep, super important. To me, one of the things that thanks, the screen's good, we've got it all fixed. one of the things that was important for me was knowing how I fit within there. So knowing maybe the values that I have and that the other people have around me. Like, I have often experienced being a square peg in a round hole, or round peg in a square hole. I don't know, not fitting. Let's just go with that. And part of that is because of the values clash, maybe. So effective communication, we want to feel like we belong. We want to pick up on problems before it gets too late. Absolutely. And often, and we'll cover this in a second, but often we're not picking up on problems before it's too late within our teams, because perhaps people don't feel safe to share what those problems are until it gets really pear-shaped. Sometimes we have cultures that are phenomenal and we can share any little bits or raise any concerns, but not all of us have always felt comfortable doing that in different environments. Yeah, absolutely spot on. So I'm going to show you some different ways that we can intentionally design and shape the way that we interact with each other. Now, as we go through this, some of you will look at some of the areas and go, yep, I feel like we nailed that pretty well. Great, keep up the good work. And there will be areas that you go, actually, maybe we need to direct our focus towards that. Now, I said this at the beginning, to put your seatbelts on, I'm going to give you quite a lot of different thoughts and options. And the one thing I don't want you to do from this, to be really clear, I do not want you to go away and feel like you need to implement everything immediately. That's not the aim of this. The aim of this is to take a bit of a helicopter overview about what it could look like. And then at the end, I'll ask you to take maybe 1 or 2 things away that you think, actually, I'm going to look at implementing that immediately. So we don't want to go and burn all our bridges. We know that any kind of change work happens when we do those small incremental changes. So it's as we go through this, you go, actually, I want to do that, and that. Great. But then land on what you're going to start with first. Do that and do it really well, and the rest will build as well. So the first point I want to share with you, which is one of my favorite topics, is around psychological safety. Some of you may have heard of this before, some of you may not have. It has been slightly misused in some contexts around using it for the concept of mental health. What I will say is, when you have a really psychologically safe environment, you definitely have better mental health outcomes within the team. And when you have a psychologically unsafe environment, you have obviously worse outcomes, higher stress, higher pressure, so on and so forth. But there is more to psychological safety than just around mental health. So let me give you one of the definitions. There's several out there, but Amy Edmondson was one of the, I won't say one of the earliest, but she was certainly one of the people who brought it into our kind of current sphere of thinking. So her definition of psychological safety is that it's the belief that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. So coming back onto the comment that was made earlier about picking up problems before it gets too late, this is absolutely where psychological safety plays a really key part. Essentially, we are looking at rewarding vulnerability, because I don't know about you, like sharing my ideas, asking questions, sharing concerns, or owning that I've screwed up and made a mistake is actually an act of vulnerability in itself. So when we have a psychologically safe environment, we have our vulnerability being rewarded and not punished. Sounds ideal, but there's a journey to get there. So pretty diagrams, they are my thing now, you can tell. This is actually Amy Edmondson's model again. She talks about 2 things. So along the bottom axis, we've got our standards, so our performance standards, obviously going from the left, low performance standards to high performance standards, i.e., are you doing well at what you've got, your job description, your role description, are you doing well with it? And then on the other axis, we've got psychological safety. So if we've got low or high psychological safety. So that's obviously when we've got the psychological safety, going back to that definition, it enables our candor, our openness, our ability to learn, our ability to fail and grow forward from failing, with high expectations of the standards. So there's 4 different areas, depending on where we land. If we have, for example, both low performance standards and low psychological safety, we have what's called the apathy zone. So I don't know if you can relate to this in the previous jobs you've had maybe, but you just kind of turn up, your heart and mind is elsewhere, and maybe whenever there's the opportunity to choose growth or to take a risk or to exert yourself, actually the choice tends to be self-protection. When we have high standards, high performance standards and low psychological safety, we have what Amy Emerson calls the anxiety zone, which sounds like my worst nightmare. So this is where we're anxious about speaking up. Perhaps the quality of our work suffers, workplace health and safety stuff can suffer because we're not willing to speak up, but we're expected to perform at a high standard and get the job done really well. So having high standards, as we can see from the anxiety zone, if anyone really wants to be in the anxiety zone, feel free to let me know. I'm sure we can find you somewhere to go and work for that. But I suspect the answer is no. And this is very much that interpersonal anxiety. So how you feel in the inside and your concerns around sharing questions, ideas, or concerns. So obviously these are two areas that we want to avoid. The third one we want to avoid is our comfort zone. So this is where we've got high psychological safety, perhaps, but a low performance standard. So then not really that much is expected of me in my role in my team or in my workplace. So we might enjoy working together. So it might be great fun. We might have what seems like really good morale because we love the people that we work with, but we're not challenged by our work. There's no sense of innovation. There's no learning because we can't have either of those without challenge. And perhaps we're not actually feeling particularly engaged with our work or particularly fulfilled with the work that we're doing. Now, that to me looks like the slightly nicer place to be than apathy or anxiety. But again, I don't know about you, but maybe you've had times in jobs where it's been really comfortable, but actually you get a bit bored. There's no stretch, there's no challenge, there's no intellectual challenge in there. So obviously the fourth square is going to be our sweet spot on where we want to be. So where we have high psychological safety and high performance standards, we have high performance and a zone where actually we're learning. Now, psychological safety can't exist for just one person. Psychological safety exists within a team. So there's been some kind of interchangeability from psychological safety to trust, but you can work on trust on one-on-one, but psychological safety requires more than one of us. So if we're highly performing together, we're learning together, we've got collaboration, it's a supportive environment, we're using our initiative, because we're able to take risks and learn from them, we're innovating, we're doing new things, we're on the cutting edge. So our team is performing at a much higher level. And people feel safe, people are supported, people feel like they're able to ask the difficult questions and things like that. So really, that's the sweet spot of where we want to be. I'm not going to talk to you today around performance standards. I suspect a lot of you are a lot clearer on what your performance standards are, what's expected from you at work, the level you're expected to work to, what your KPIs are, etc., etc. But let's dive a little bit deeper into your psychological safety. What the heck is it? So the other model that I use is by a gentleman called Timothy Clark. Because he has what he calls 4 stages of psychological safety. So this again is very much his model and not mine. There's 2 things that we want to see present. Well, there's 2 things that are present. We either have social friction, so where maybe we're not getting on with the people around us, we don't feel safe, we don't feel like we can challenge, ask questions, so on and so forth. And that can be quite a destructive force in a team. But the constructive force we want to have in the team is that intellectual friction. So that real sense of good minds bashing up against each other, able to nut things out, come up with the best solutions for the team, and of course for our clients, because if our team is working really well, we're serving our clients in the best possible way because we're able to ask difficult questions. We're able to dig in and go, what would happen if? Let's explore these ideas and to put all our ideas on the table and then to craft and create something that serves our clients best. So obviously with psychological safety, we want to decrease that sense of social friction. So perhaps the bickering, a sense of gossip, sense of competition between people, those kind of elements. And obviously we want to increase the level of intellectual friction. How do we do it? I'm really glad you asked. Thanks very much. So again, it's kind of on 2 factors. We have a respect on the left-hand side and then permission on the bottom. So respect, this is the kind of level of regard and esteem that we give to each other. So the sense that when you're working with people in your team, you know that you've got a high level of respect. If you feel that you're valued, you feel that you're appreciated, you can both give and receive high regard and esteem. So your sense of self-esteem is good, and you're able to compliment and give that and value the other people in the team as well. The permission is the degree that we allow other people to influence us, so to have a say in how we operate, people that we feel that we can go to and share our ideas and help to craft and form those thought processes, and the degree that we allow others to participate in what we're doing. This always makes me laugh. I don't know about you at school, depends how old you are listening to this, but when I was at school and we were handwriting exams, everyone used to sit like this so that you couldn't copy each other's work. I don't know how that works with computers. Mind you, they've got so small now, they'd be on tablets. But that's what this always reminds me of. It's not having this and keeping our heads down and just keeping all the gold that we have to offer to ourselves and other people doing the same, but actually going, do you know what? You can see what I've got, because this isn't a threat to me. It's not a threat to other people. Absolutely, we can share our knowledge, we can share our skills, and we can ask the crazy questions that might be lingering in our minds. So you can't see most of my desk here, but it is covered in post-it notes, and they're my kind of crazy ideas. Some come to life, some don't. I don't have a problem with anyone seeing those kind of things. So anyone that I might work with, I'm like, cool, you're going to have something that adds to this particular post-it note. So it's reducing that share, that sense of feeling like we have to protect ourselves, and we can actually work together for the greater good. I love being able to make sure people can replace me so I can go away or off sick and my job won't suffer. Yeah, absolutely. And then it's not a threat to you. It's not, oh, well, I'm away, someone's going to act up for me and then maybe they'll be after my job. It's like, more power to you. If you got everything you need, off you go, and we're good. So I'm going to talk about the 4 stages, which is trick because there's technically 5, but you'll see why in a second. But the first level in the leader factor model, so Timothy Clark's model on psychological safety, is inclusion safety. So everything builds on this. Everything. If you don't have this level within your team, regardless if you think you might have elements of the levels that are coming, if everyone in your team does not experience inclusion safety, you don't have it. It can't be one person's on inclusion, someone else is on level 3, someone else is on level 4. Psychological safety defaults down to that kind of lowest level of where people feel that they're at. So let me give you a bit of an explanation of what it is. It'd be helpful to know if we will need to be there. So inclusion safety is where all of us in the team feel accepted for who we are, including our unique attributes and our characteristics. So it's about being worthy purely because you're a human. So being valued simply for who you are, rather than worthiness, which is more about what you do. So this is about being valued for who you are being. Now, there's always an exchange in every level of psychological safety between you and the team. So the exchange in inclusion safety is that the team gives you that sense of inclusion and that acceptance for being who you are. And in return, as the individual, you are what Timothy Clark calls human and harmless. So you bring your full self to work. You bring your skills, your thoughts, your attributes, your brain, your culture, your characteristics, everything that makes you uniquely you. The team includes you for that. You turn up as that, and you don't pose a sense of harm to the team. Now, when we have that sense of harm, it makes perfect sense to exclude someone. So if I'm not saying, just to be really clear, that if there's someone in your team that's doing damage, that you go, oh, I have to give you inclusion safety, no matter what you say or how you act or how you attack people or what that might look like, that's not being harmless. That's just being human, not being harmless. So it's really important to remember it's being human and harmless to the team. If we don't have that, so if there's any form of harm around that, that's where we have exclusion. So if I'm in a team and I don't feel like I'm included, so I maybe feel that maybe my thoughts aren't valued, or the suggestions that I have, or you don't like me because of my culture, or you don't accept me because I'm English and you're not, like whatever that might look like, And I make some of them in jest, but if there's any sense that I don't belong in a team and I have that sense of belonging, then I'm on the outside and I'm excluded. Really important. I'd like to just, again, if you're watching and catch up, please grab a pen and scribble your thoughts down. If you're here, share with me in the chat. What does it look like when we're excluded? What does a lack of psychological safety look like? Like, what might you see happening in a team if we don't have psychological safety and we're sitting in that exclusion area? Absolutely not working as a team. I'd add to not working as a team as it could even be actively being destructive to the team. We see individual people withdraw or groups of people withdraw, individuals perhaps pushing agendas and pushing ideas. We might see a really high level of gossip. Cliques can form. So we might have, let's say we've got a team of 10, we might have 3 people who get on really well but exclude everyone else. So we start to see some of those cliques, bullying, no collaboration, that kind of sense. Now, I don't know about you, but I am fully out. That is not a team that I want to be part of. And this is why this is so important. Often when I go in and I'm working with teams and I say, once I've gone through the full model and I say, great, where do you think your team's at? And they'll be usually at the higher levels, but yet they brought me in because we're having conversations around cliques, around the team aren't working together, around bullying that might be going on or workplace harassment, and yet they still think they've got high psychological safety. When you've got those things going on, you don't. Yeah, cliquey teams can be really lonely. When you're the person, if you think you're the only one, how many times have you had this conversation with someone where you've shared a concern and they go, yeah, me too. And you're like, I thought it was just me. There's a lot of that can go on in teams when we feel like we don't have that psychological safety. So let's talk about the second level. So I know I dropped back and then I'm going forward again. Yeah, not feeling valued as well. Yeah, not feeling valued for who I am purely as a person and not feeling valued for what I have to offer into the team as well. So on our second level of psychological safety, once we've got that inclusion safety, and that can take time, like do not expect inclusion safety to happen overnight. That takes work to understand who we've got in the team, value them for what they have, understand their skills, so on and so forth. However, when we do have that, we can look at the second level. So learner safety. This is where you feel, I know it's going to be obvious, it's safe to learn. So it's learning in the sense of people, context that you're in, perhaps culture, the skills, all the things that you need to learn to belong in the organization or the team that you're in. So it'll involve things like being able to ask questions, both giving and receiving feedback, experimenting, making mistakes, being able to take risks safely. Because remember, if we come back to our definition of psychological safety, it's about being able to do those things without effectively harm of retribution. So I can take risks and I can grow and I can test and measure little bits of things that I'm trying to do. I can have those conversations. So it meets my need and your need as a human being to learn and grow and respects the need for that. So again, remember, there's always an exchange. So the team in a learner safety environment, they encourage you to learn. Like they want you to be the best member of the team that you can be, A, for the team, and B, because we've got inclusion safety and we value you as you, we actually want you to be the best for you as well. So the team encourages us to learn and sets up an environment where we can learn around our skills, learning about the other people in our team, learning about the context that we're doing the work in, the culture, our clients, all that kind of stuff. And in return, as the individual, we engage in that learning. So learning's not a passive thing. I used to think, when we revised again at school, maybe if I just slept on a textbook, I'd absorb it by osmosis. Didn't work, just hurt my neck. Don't try that approach. It's very much an active engagement between you and the team. So our third level is contributor safety. So this, when we feel part of the team, we feel like we're able to learn and grow and to take risks. Now we feel like we're able to contribute our skills and abilities to make not just a contribution, but a meaningful contribution. So meaningful for me and meaningful for the team. So this meets my need to make a difference. It meets my need to contribute. So remember, we're not in that apathy zone where maybe, or the comfort zone on that first quadrant that I showed you. Neither of those are really about contributing, because we either don't feel like we can be bothered to, or actually it's too comfortable and we don't want to stretch and grow further. So it respects my ability as an individual to add value to the work that we do, to add value to the team, to the organisation, to the clients that maybe I work with. And again, there's always an exchange. I'm just going to drop to the comments. So we love feeling valued. Yeah. So you love feeling valued and people listening to my experience or the knowledge that I have. Yeah, absolutely. So being able to contribute to discussions, to contribute to teams, adds a sense of value to you. Now, in this exchange, there's two things that happens in contributor safety. The team gives you that sense of autonomy to contribute. So to be able to share your experience, to be able to share your knowledge, to be able to share perhaps your point of view. But the autonomy is with guidance. So we're not just cutting you out on your own and going, great, contribute, go change the world, go change the team, do whatever you want. We're giving you the safety of the guidance as to what that looks like, because otherwise that's not actually safe, because we're cutting you off and leaving you on your own to go and do whatever, which is going to bring us back to that sense of exclusion and feeling like we're alone, not feeling valued, feeling lonely. So the team gives us autonomy with guidance. In return, what do we give? Results. We can't contribute and not give results. That is our focus of why we're contributing, and results can mean different things. So here we had a comment around listening to experience. So the result might be that I'm being able to mentor people and help them grow, or I'm sharing my knowledge, or I'm sharing my ideas, and I'm putting my thoughts on the table to help us grow and come up with something collectively. And then the final stage, which always makes me laugh, because usually when I say to people, where do you feel that you're at? And they say, yeah, challenge of safety is definitely it. We definitely will have challenge of safety. And you'll see why I laugh in a second. I'm just going to drop back to the comments. So being able to make a mistake and be supported to learn from it, not being reprimanded and feeling like an idiot. Yeah, really important. So be able to put my hand up and say I've made a mistake rather than hiding it. Spot on. And that's in our learner safety. So that's where we feel like we're able to do that, because we're not going to get fired, we're not going to get chastised. We may be performance managed if we get it bad enough, but in a supportive way that helps us grow and helps us all move towards a good element of being able to contribute and contribute meaningfully again. So the challenge of safety, often when I put this up, as I said before, teams will be like, yeah, we definitely have challenge of safety, because this is where you feel safe to speak up and safe to challenge the status quo. There is usually, and I wish I could see all of your faces as I ask you this, there is usually at least one person in any team who feels like we have challenge of safety, because they're the one that feel they have no problem speaking up, they're able to assert their ideas. And sometimes that can be because they're not thinking about the people around them as well. Here's my ideas, here's my agenda. I think we should do this. I'm going to challenge the status quo. I love that about those people. And I'm really glad that they feel they're there. But remember, this is a sense of collectiveness with psychological safety. So if everyone in the team doesn't feel able to do what that person does, we don't have that sense of psychological safety together. Now, this is really important, because it's not until we get to challenge of safety that innovation occurs. So I don't necessarily mean world-changing innovation, where we're doing the new thing that no one ever has done before, but it might be around our continuous improvement. It might be around the small ideas that we have that actually down the line can make the biggest difference. Because if we don't feel that we can speak up and we don't feel that we can challenge the status quo in any way, we're not going to have that opportunity to improve. So challenge of safety is when we have that and we feel like we can speak up, we can identify areas of improvement, both in ourselves, in other people, and in the team and the work that we're doing. Again, remember, without that fear of retaliation or retribution. So the exchange on this final stage is the team gives us cover and protection. So we are safe. So think of it like, I like to think of it like an umbrella. We get that cover and that protection from the team. And in return, we give our candor and we will challenge the status quo. Now, sometimes, and I know for some of you, you may be sitting there going, you know, I'm good, I don't want to do that. I know that can be a real act of bravery for a lot of people. And that's why it's important that it's an exchange, because if I'm brave and I'm stepping out and I'm being candid and I'm sharing my thoughts, concerns, my ideas, I need to know you've got my back. I need to know there's not that sense I'm not going to face retaliation or be excluded for doing so. Yeah, being supported and not belittled. Absolutely. Now, it doesn't mean when you share those ideas and you challenge that status quo that it's all going to be accepted, but that's the joy of it. We all stick it in one big mess on the table together and then pull it out together and look at what's really going to work in the long run. I'm going to park psychological safety for there. I realize there's a lot of information in that. I would really encourage you to come back and listen to this again and go through those and actually self-identify where you think you're at. Now, I'll give you a hint. Most of you are probably around inclusion, learner safety. Depending on how long you've been in your organization, remember, it's not just you, it's the whole team. My suggestion is start there and have a think about how do we make sure that everyone in the team feels that they're included in a way that values them. So I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, there was the whole treat other people as you want to be treated. Had to get that the right way around there. I very much believe when we're looking at inclusion safety, it's about treating and accepting other people in the way that they want to be accepted. Because I don't know you. I don't know what's important to you. I don't know your culture. I don't know your personal values. I don't know your experiences. I don't know the full amazingness of everything you have to bring to the team unless I sit down and have a conversation with you. Now, that's not just the one-on-one conversations. There's the collective conversations too. So if you're not sure where to start, that is my strong suggestion. Really nail, how am I making sure that everyone in my team feels included? Now, if you're a leader, great. If you're not, great. That same question still applies because it's everyone's responsibility. It's not just for the leader to say, I am going to make sure everyone feels included, because you can't mandate that. Like, I can't force, say, Mandy or Rita and just be like, great, well, we're going to make sure everyone's included. I'm going to make sure you know what you're doing, because I'm not including their voice in that conversation there around inclusion too. So have a think for yourself about how you might do that. So you can step, like, and Mandy's just said in the comments, stepping back as a leader, allowing others to lead and step up, working out the solutions to problems themselves so they don't need to come to you. Yes, I'd suggest that's more around learner and contributor safety. So that's about perhaps what we're doing. So we want to come to that level of inclusion, which is literally how do we work better in our teams at making sure that we accept humans for being humans. So it's about who we're being. So some of your diversity and inclusion stuff will fall in that too, but it's also around that personal responsibility about how do we really value humans as humans. And it sounds like a really easy question until you start to think about what it looks like in practice. Now, one thing I didn't ask was whether we were supposed to have a break. So unless are we supposed to have a break? No, great, because I haven't planned for one. So we'll carry on. So if you're watching at home, if you're watching this in your own time, you can press pause and get a cup of tea. If you're with me now, you can have a cup of tea in a bit. So the next thing I want to talk to you about is what I refer to as the team's rules of engagement. Now, there we go. This might look familiar to some of you if you've been around the work environment for long enough. So the rules of engagement to me when I work with teams is about what are our values and behaviours. Some of you will have cringed when I mention the word values because this is the image that you'll think of. Now, I spent way too long on the internet looking for some of these, and I have a whole collection of them now. But if you remember, I think it was like 90s, maybe even earlier, there were a lot of posters as you walked into many offices on the wall. And if you have these on your wall, I apologize in advance, but I'm now going to tell you what you can do with them politely. There'd be a picture on it. There'd be a big, thick black border around it, and it would have some kind of word underneath. Now, this one was walk the talk. The one that I really remember is the eagle soaring, and it said leadership underneath. And then the tagline was something like, we rise above our problems, or something equally trite and crap. This one, and it's in such small print, I'll have to lean in to read it. So walk the talk. Take the initiative and lead the way. You can make the difference. What the hell does that mean? Like, there is no bringing this into reality for people. So when I'm talking to you about values and behaviors, you will have your organizational values. These are different. This is your particular team. What are the shared values that you have, and what are the behaviors around that? We don't want them to become things that are on the wall and just sit on the wall forever. We definitely don't want large bordered, blackboarded posters up on the wall that no one ever looks again. But if we were going to have this as our value, which I'd suggest you don't, you come up with something clearer. But what does walking the talk actually mean? Let's, for 1 minute, assume that you're going to take this slide, you're going to print this out, and you're going to put the walk the talk on your wall in your team. Please don't. But if you did, you then employ me as a member of your staff, and I come in and say, great, how do I operate within this team in a way that is psychologically safe? So you can't include me if I don't know what your values and behavior are as a collective, as a team. Now, if you are sitting there going, we've never defined our values and behaviors and how we have our team rules of engagement as a team, you're not on your own. It's actually really rare that I have a conversation with a team and I say, what are your 3 team values and what do they look like in reality? That anyone can answer that consistently. What we want to have, though, is, I always suggest about 3 because you want to be able to remember them, a set of values that are driven from within the team. So normally in your organization, you'll walk in and they'll say, here's your organizational values. You have no say in these. This is what they are. But with our team rules of engagement, we can design those within our team ourselves. So it's about going, what's important to us as individuals, and collectively, what do we want to agree to as our rules of engagement? So if, for example, you did pick walk the talk, I should be able to walk into your team and know exactly what the behaviors are that I need to demonstrate that shows that that value is important to me. I look at walk the talk and I'm like, I don't really know what I would put there as the behaviors for that. But let me give you another example. So a team I worked with a couple of weeks ago actually came up with one of their values was supportive. Now, just in the comments, just think what supportive means to you as a value. So being listened to. For me, it means that people have got my back, that you're allowed to make mistakes. So already we've got 3 different definitions of what supportive means. So if I walk into the team and you just say to me, my manager's encouraging me to do what I do best. Great. So now we've got 4 definitions. Literally from one word, we have 4 different experiences of what that word means. So if I walk into your team and join your team and you say one of our values is being supportive to each other, I need to know what that looks like for the team. And I need to know what it looks like for me, because supportive to me, I'm quite an introvert. I like to work on my own. Supportive to me is actually, you leave me the hell alone to get on with my work, but you have my back when I need you to. On the flip side, supportive to someone else could mean you come and check in with me in the morning, ask me how my day's going. You check in with me in the afternoon, ask me how my day's going. Whatever that might look like, it's super important to define the behaviors that sit underneath the value, because otherwise we're just paying lip service to them. So you can see now why this supports the level of inclusion safety around psychological safety, because if I'm going to be included as part of your team, I need to know what's important to this team. And even more than that, I need to know how to be, what to do in order to meet those values and in order to fit in as part of that team. So if little things like, I don't know what the value would be, but there might be a behavior around that of we celebrate people's birthdays. Now, if I don't know that, how do I celebrate your birthday? Or, you know, is it that one person coordinates a cake? Is it like where I used to work, on your birthday, you were the person that brought the cake in, which was just wrong to me, but it seems to be the standard approach. It's your birthday, you get to bring the cake. At least you get the cake that you want. But if I don't know those things, they might seem really minor, But actually in the sense of me feeling included or excluded, that's massive. Like if I turn up and my first week with you, you taught me through the values, and we celebrate birthdays. And the second week, it's my birthday, and I don't know that I'm supposed to bring a cake in. I don't know how to be part of this team. And immediately there's going to be some animosity, perhaps, some tension, perhaps. We might be able to laugh it off, but I'm going to feel flipping awful. Now, it's a really minor example when it comes to birthdays, but think about all the ways that you work together in your team. If I don't know how to do that and how to engage well with you as a team, then actually I can't be fully part of your team. If you haven't sat and worked through these, one of the questions I was going to pop up on here was literally the question, okay, we reject that, just to be really clear, this is my favorite stamp, reject, please do not put them on blackboarded posters on your wall unless you've got the behaviours really clearly defined underneath. But one of my questions to you to reflect on, and I suggest if you're watching this and catching up on it, you actually pause this and take some time to think about it. What do you think your team values and behaviours are? And I'd encourage you to ask these questions amongst your team members too. So you might want to set aside half an hour in one of your team meetings, get people prepared before you come, and say, like, just jot down, what do you think, Bob, our team values and behaviours are? What does Cheryl think team values and behaviours are? And you will see, I'm pretty certain, quite a wide range of definitions of those behaviours that sit under some of the values. Hopefully some of the values will be consistent. So it's about your team rules of engagement, about how you work together. So it's not about perhaps our customer focus, that's a different sense, but it's about how do we actually work as one entity, as a team. More often than not, when I ask people this question, either individuals can't define it or the team can't collectively define it, which is why it takes time and it's well worth the investment. I have a strong bias towards it, but it's well worth doing with your teams, of deriving from the ground up, not top down, what those values and behaviours are, and get the consensus and the buy-in and agreement on those. So we have some ideas in here, above the line behaviour, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, being encouraged to speak out and challenge things. So we've got individuals that might have a sense of what those values are. When we put them together, does everyone have that shared sense? So that's where it becomes really important. That's the team rules of engagement, not your personal manifesto within that. Having said that, it is important that your personal manifesto is captured within the team values. Similar to the why, if my values clash with my team values, we've got a problem. If the behaviours that I demonstrate through a value clash with the team ones, again, we've got a problem and a source of tension. So we do want them to kind of all fit in together nicely. Kind of taps into my next point around our standards and expectations versus our unwritten ground rules. So again, I don't know about you, but I've worked in a team where what has been said, so I'll define what these are in a minute, but the standards and expectations, so what I'm told is expected of me, vastly differs from what might actually be expected of me. So when we're talking about unwritten ground rules, we're talking about those things that kind of bubble along under the surface and maybe we're expected to know, but no one's really told us. So a really good example of this is, so standards, just to be clear, standards are the kind of things that we hold ourselves to, either individually or as a team, and our expectations are, as it would say, what we expect from other people. So it's kind of the standards and expectations are this is how we do it around here. So this is how we do X, Y, and Z within our team. The unwritten ground rules are what actually happens. So time is a really good example of this. The standards and expectations may be that you are allowed to work flexi time. Now, in my old organisation, I found out 3 years in, flexi time was actually you had to be there between the hours of 10 and 2, and what you did around that was flexible, as long as you were there for the middle of the day. As I say, it took me 3 years to find that out. So I didn't do it. Because the unwritten ground rule was actually, as long as you do your hours and as long as the job gets done, it doesn't matter what's written there, you come in when you like. So for example, sometimes I would have an appointment in the morning and I might rock up at 1 and I'd work 1 till 10. I would still get the job done. I'd still have everything done that needed to be done. But that was the unwritten ground rules. It was the stuff that kind of bubbled along under the surface. Now, that served me really well. What if it's the other way? What if the standard and expectation is you're allowed to work flexi time, and as long as you get the job done, like on paper it's written, as long as you get the job done, we don't mind when you do it or how you do it, as long as it's done and you're doing your hours within the week. Whereas the unwritten ground rule that we think of it like a little landmine, what might be there is that there's actually an expectation that you turn up at 9 and you leave at 5. And flexi time in the unwritten ground rules might be, but we don't mind if you do 8 till 6. Or if you're really lucky, 9:05 to 5:05. So again, I say in jest, but I imagine a lot of us have been part of teams where what we're told and what actually happens within the team, and sometimes within certain members of the team, can differ. So one of yes, if I made my KPIs, I wasn't questioned. Yeah, but if you don't, then there's problems. Yeah. So if you knew that the standards that you had to meet your KPIs, however that looked, I'm interpreting into your comment, but however that looked, as long as you met your KPIs, it was good. And if you didn't, then obviously there were problems. But what if meeting your KPIs meant that they expected you to be there every Monday and Friday, but you actually met your KPIs and nailed it by doing hours between Tuesday and Thursday? So times are really, I'd say obvious. I don't know that any of it's obvious in that sense, but it's an easy one to play with, because I think we've probably all had that experience of what I've been told around my working hours and what actually happens is different. One of my favorite Brené Brown quotes, and there's a lot, but I'm only going to use one for you today, is this: clear is kind, unclear is unkind. So if we have our standards and expectations, we may think we're being kind because we're clear. However, if we muddy the water with those unwritten ground rules, then actually it's not clear, and that's not kind. It's not kind to ourselves. It's not kind to our peers. It's not kind to the people that we lead. So my encouragement to you is to really nail down what those expectations are. I'm going to ask you another question. So again, either scribble this down for yourself, or if you're with me, maybe share your thoughts in the chat. Think about the team that you're a part of at the moment. And answer this question: what do you believe are the expectations of your team? So what's expected of you? So someone's already said KPIs are one of their expectations, that they have to meet their KPIs. If you've written that down, just scribble next to that, what's expected of you in meeting those KPIs. So yeah, you're expected to meet them, but how? How about the time? How about resources? All those kind of things. I'm going to pause for 5 minutes, and I'm going to let you scribble down your thoughts on that. And then I'm going to come back and share a reflection. Yeah, you and me both. I never work best when I'm micromanaged, and I hated coming to work. Absolutely the same. My expectation was that I was not micromanaged. The reality was that I was. So think about those expectations. What was expected of you? If this is in your current role, and I don't suspect it is, but if it's in your current role with the micromanaging, like what's expected of you within that? What do you think other people expect of each other within your team? I'll give you a few minutes. Beautiful. So we've got a couple of shares in the chat, which I'm going to share with you, and then I'm going to give you another minute or so just to jot down some other potential expectations. So completing my work commitments daily within the 8-hour but time managed throughout the day by myself. Yep. Being courteous to my teammates at all times. The expectations around what I need to do to meet my KPIs. Representing the company internally and externally, so not speaking badly of it or of other businesses. Daily sales calls, I think it's around KPIs, but my daily sales calls, setting up meetings, invoicing regularly, onboarding clients as per policies and procedures and following said policies and procedures, and signing up 2 clients per work, keeping myself and my teammates and my clients safe, personal development. Yep, I love that that's expected within the team. That's beautiful. So one of my reflections when I get people to do this is that often the expectations land on what I'm expected to do. So I'm expected to do X, Y, and Z. I'm expected to meet these KPIs. One of the other things I'd love you to jot down is what's your sense of expectations for who you're expected to be within the team? Like, how are you expected to show up as a person? Because the doing is one part, but who we're being, again, coming back to that psychological safety, whether it's positive for you at the moment or it's not, what do you feel is expected of how you turn up? So to give you an example, I did this recently with a team, and they said one of the expectations, one person said, one of the expectations they felt in the team was that they never shared their personal problems at work. Now, they were going through quite a lot of challenges with family health stuff, and they felt the minute that they walked in the door, that had to be parked and that had to be left behind. Now, fortunately, there were other members, they were brave enough to share it in the group, and there were other members of the team there. And the response is very much like, no, we don't expect that. Like, we want you to share it. But their perception of that expectation was really different. So just going to give you another 30 seconds to perhaps jot some of those down, because I think we naturally jump to perhaps what's some of the positive or what you may label as a positive expectation for you. But some of the others probably exist in there as well. So I'll give you a minute to just jot down your thoughts around that. If you want to share, feel free, but I know that some of these can be quite personal, so I'll get you to reflect on those for yourself if not. Yep, so someone said leaving problems at home and show up to work ready to work. Yep. Showing up on time, being a great communicator. So when you stop and you pause and you look at that list around the expectations of your team, whether you're the leader of the team currently, whether you're working your way towards leadership, or whether you're just part of a team that you're thinking of, it may be your leadership team, it may be the team that you lead, whatever that looks like for you. The key is, what's the consensus? Like, coming back to Brene Brown's quote, clear is kind, unclear is unkind. Let's think about the person that I just mentioned before, who had a lot of family stuff going on, a lot of emotions around it, and felt like she had to leave that at the door. But the reality was that she didn't have to do that, but she thought that was the expectation on her. So for her, it wasn't particularly kind, because the lack of clarity around that meant that she was suppressing and pushing down her emotions, which, as we all know, it's like trying to hold a beach ball under the water. You can only do it for so long. And she felt like she couldn't bring her full self to work and what that looked like. Now, I'm not saying that she then expected the 8 hours to be spent going through her emotions and so on and so forth, but she actually wanted to just be able to walk in and go, I'm having a really crappy day and I'm really emotional. This is what I need. This is how you can be my best teammate today. So when you look at that list, the takeaway I want you to take and to look at within your own teams is, where's the consensus? So we want consensus on what our standards and expectations are of the team. We want it to be really clear. We want to stick with the clear is kind. So have some of those conversations with the people around you, not with some of the people, with all the people in your team, and get clarity on what those expectations are. It's funny, the more I look at the word expectations, the more it looks like it's spelled wrong. I've got no idea. So I'm just going to go to a complete side tangent here. It's like the word penguin. I promise you, you type the word penguin and look at it, the more you stare at the word penguin, the worse it looks for its spelling. Anyway, Side note, coming back to your team expectations, have those discussions. It's different from the values and behaviors that we just talked about. So it's different from your rules of engagement, but your rules of engagement will form part of your expectations on your team. And it's really worth diving in, having the conversations about what's expected of us and what's said, maybe even what's written in our job descriptions or our contracts about what's expected of us, and what are the underground or the unwritten ground rules that are kind of bubbling along under the surface that we actually adhere to. Now, this is really good because it could mean that there's some great changes to make in your team dynamics, or it's really good because you're giving clarity to that. So does everyone in your team know the expectations? If they kind of all articulate them the same, hint, the answer is no. Are they communicated really well? When we set projects and we're working on particular projects together, or maybe even working with particular client groups, whatever that looks like, is it communicated as to what the expectations are? It might be expectations about outcome. It might be expectations about the process that we go through to get there. But if we're not all on the same page, then we haven't got that exceptional team that we're talking about. And if we're not all on the same page, again, coming back to the psychological safety, how do I learn? How do I contribute to my fullest if I'm not clear about what it looks like to be able to contribute to my fullest? So it's all about communicating with the team and they're feeling safe to communicate. Yeah. So if you take nothing else away from the 2 hours, possibly slightly less, but the 2 hours that we've got together today, clear is kind, unclear is unkind. If you take that one motto and apply it across a lot of what you do, I think it opens up that opportunity to reflect not only on what you're doing as an individual, but how the team works together as well. Clarity, yeah, love it. So if you're like me, you have seen your post-it notes on your desk, write that on one, stick it on your screen, and think about how am I going to ensure that there's clarity across all the areas that I work with within my team. Am I communicating my own expectations? So for those of you who might be like me, who don't like to be the center of attention, and actually birthday day is the worst day, so I always used to book it off and bring in cakes the next day. Is that okay? Is that something that is a safe thing to do within your teams? And have you communicated to people that if you don't like how we celebrate birthdays, or you don't like how we celebrate achievements, or whatever it might be, have you managed what your expectations are around that as well, and have those conversations? So some really meaty conversations to have. And that leads me on to my next point about voice share. So it's all very well, and we've talked, I see here, talked about psychological safety, including everyone's voice, our making sure that everyone's voice is captured within our rules of engagement, having conversations and building clarity around standards and expectations and our unwritten ground rules. But what if people don't want to speak? Or how do we make sure that everyone's voice, remember inclusion safety, everyone's voice is captured within that? This is one of my favorite studies that was ever done. I'm going to ask you for a couple of shares for a number in a second. So there was a study a long time ago done. And the question that was asked to the participants, now it was husband and wife participants, only that they studied at the time. They asked the question independently to the husband and to the wife, what percentage of the housework do you do? And then they took husband percentage, wife percentage, added the percentages together. What do you reckon was the average percentage that was there? So let's say we ask my husband, I don't have one, so his is 0%, but let's say we ask my husband what percentage of housework that he did, and then they ask the females what percentage of housework they did. So let's say it was 40% husband, 60% wife, add the two together, the answer would be 100%. So what do you think the total? So 90 women to husbands, so 92% total, 8% kids. You had to add, they didn't ask them that, but either that's a reflection of your home environment in there or not. But when you add just the husband and wife together there, we've got 92%. What are your other thoughts? Anyone else got thoughts about what the total percentage would be when you add the husband, what he thought his percentage was, and when you add the wife and her percentage, what do you think it was? 92, 100% total, so 50 each. So any advances on that? 40% total, 75% total. All right, interesting. So the actual answer was 130%. I'm now pausing myself because it was either 130 or 160, but you get the point. Everyone thought they were doing way more than they were. I would love to see the breakdown. I'm pretty sure it was 130. I would love to see the breakdown of what that looked like. I can just imagine like wife being 120, husband 10, whatever that looks like. But yeah, the total came to way more than 100. Now, what does that have to do with voice share? In one sense, absolutely nothing. You do whatever percentage of housework you want to do with your partner, and that's all good for me. However, the way they used that was to literally do what I've done with you. So in a group, when I ask that question, so let's say I'm in a face-to-face, if you remember those days, we used to do face-to-face workshops all the time, and you ask a group and there's a leader and say there are 10 team members, so say there's 11 people in the room. There's two ways of getting this information. One is I can do what I did then with you, and I can just throw it out and wait for the first person to share. So the first share said 92%. The second share said 50 each, that was 100%. So there was only an 8% shift from that because the first voice that shares anchors the whole room. So the first person to share their thought, in this case it was numbers, so it's pretty easy to look at. The first person to share their thought, whatever it might be around. So let's say you're having a team brainstorming about what do we want to do for this project, or what do we think the answer is to X, Y, Z. The first person to share will usually anchor the entire conversation within the room. Now, this is even stronger if the first person to share, so leaders, I'm especially looking at you right now. If you are the first person to share your thoughts, do not expect your team to move very far from your ideas. There may be a little bit of a shift, but you will anchor even more so than the other participants in the room. You will anchor the level of thought and the diversity of thought. So how do we change that? So if the first voice is going to anchor the group, but actually we want everyone's input in its fullness, I could have done this a different way with you then. I could have said, instead of typing it into the chat, I could have asked you to send me a private message in the chat. So the first person who shared, no one else would have seen their response other than me, which means that the second person who shared had nothing to anchor that on, had no way to generate the idea of what they thought the answer was, other than to come up with it themselves. So if we want a greater diversity of thought captured within our team, and you do, there's no other way of putting that, we want to capture the greatest diversity of the voices, of the ideas, of the plans, of the problem solving within a group. We need to look at how we make sure that we capture. So if I think of all of you who are either watching now or listening to it later, if I want to capture the best ideas that you've got that are purely from you, I need to ask you before I share with you what anyone else has shared. Now, give me some thoughts. Yeah, so step back and allow them to step up. But also, when I used to run TAE, for those of you who have suffered through your Cert 4 in training and assessment, firstly, sorry. Secondly, it's well worth doing. I used to talk to them about class wars, and there's always someone in a class, be it adult or child education, there's always someone who is leading the room, and it's not always the leader. Same happens within our teams. Depending on the team dynamics, the team leader, for want of a better title, may not always be the voice that leads the conversation. You may have someone who everyone really respects and looks up to, who may have been there for like 40 years in the business, knows it really well, that even the team leader might default to their voice, but we still don't want their voice being the anchor. So yeah, absolutely, we can get people to share anonymously first. I'd love some other thoughts about what that might look like. So we can share anonymously. So one way we could do that is kind of anonymous surveys. There's some great free platforms out there that you can use. I use Wispform for mine. Brainstorming, absolutely. And how do you make sure that everyone's voice is captured in the brainstorm, that we're not anchoring around one particular voice in a brainstorm? What are your thoughts on that? So yeah, Wispform, if you're ever looking for something that's free and anonymous, really easy to use. You could send that out to your team members, say, hey, here's the question I'm going to ask. I'd love your thoughts. Now, potentially they're going to talk amongst themselves. You can't, police everything in that sense, but you're giving everyone the opportunity to anonymously share their thoughts or their project ideas. You can collect those and you can put them on the table. Yeah, making your meetings more relaxed, more informal, having people potentially partner up in groups first. I do this a lot when I'm facilitating bigger groups, and I'll break them into pairs, or if we're online, I'll put you into breakout rooms and say, just share with the one person, because then you've only got 2 voices, not 20 voices anchored around one, and then share those thoughts. I let one team member run weekly meetings, so it's not the same person. Yeah, great way of doing it as well. Competitions for ideas with a prize. Yeah, give them a motivation to want to contribute as well. But we want to make sure that we are getting that diversity and we're getting that really divergent range of ideas, not a convergent range of ideas that's centered around one. Would be a miss of me not to have this in a graph form as well. So the line is what we're aiming at. So that's that equal share where everyone's voice is given weight. It doesn't mean everyone's idea is great. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's giving everyone the opportunity to share their idea that's truly their idea, not influenced by someone else. So we're aiming for equal share. We either get in a group, and you may relate to this, you may be an undersharer, you may be more reluctant to speak out and share your ideas, and your worst nightmare is when someone says, we're going to go around the table and we're going to start with you. And you're like, I would like to be the last person to share my ideas and base it from everyone else's. You're an oversharer. All good. So you probably fall into this one. So if we're going around the table and I say, we're going to start with you, you're like, yes, I get to go first and I can share my ideas, and everyone sit down because I've got a lot of them, which is great. And we want to capture both, because both, and this is my point in here, both of these people, the oversharers and our undersharers, have absolute gold ideas, some that we may never hear, and some that may shape everyone else's viewpoint and opinions. So it depends on the situation. I'm the same. Generally, I'm an undersharer if I don't feel safe. So again, let's come back to how do we make this safe for everyone? Part of that is knowing who are our oversharers and undersharers. And I want to be clear that there's no judgment label attached to those. Like, we're all wired differently. It's fine. That's how life goes. If you're naturally an oversharer, how do you take responsibility to step back and encourage the undersharers to share? If you're an undersharer, how do you take responsibility for stepping up as well? So as a leader, our responsibility is to really land on that equal voice share within our teams. So sometimes you purposefully step back, which is great. Yeah. Having a good MC that can pull out the best in everyone. Yeah. I often say, especially if you're having difficult conversations with teams, or you're wanting to do team development work and project ideas, it's really hard as the leader to not influence the group. Because even if that's not your intention, when you are asking person X to expand on their idea, but person Y didn't get to because we didn't have the time to, our participants in the group can read different things into that, and we can't necessarily control what's going on in there. Whereas sometimes when an external person, and it doesn't have to be external to your organization, sometimes just loaning someone from a different team to facilitate a brainstorming idea can encourage people to open up in a way that they might not do otherwise. So I started to ask you this question already. But specifically within your team, I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to reflect on this question. How can you increase voice share? And I probably should have put in your team. So we've spoken generally, but think of at least 1 or 2 ideas that you can commit to for increasing voice share within your own team. Now, again, I said this before, if you're the leader, great. If you're not the leader, great. It doesn't matter. We all have a responsibility to look at how we can do these things. So as an individual within the team that you're a part of, what's some ideas that you can do? So I'll give you a couple of minutes just to jot your thoughts down with a couple of moments of silence. And then I'll grab your ideas from the chat and get you to reflect on your own if you're watching this on catch up. Yeah, I love the ones in the chat. I'm going to add a couple of thoughts in here as well for you. So more of a round table, absolutely. And how do you make sure that you're getting all the ideas from the round table? So if I'm the first person to share in your round table, how are you going to make sure that other people's voices aren't anchored around what I'm sure will be a wonderful idea from me, but how are you going to make sure that everyone doesn't anchor around mine? So I see in here we've got anonymous idea sharing, so that's a great way of starting. Someone actually suggested once that you just put a box on the table, people scribble their thoughts down and put them in the box, which I love. I'm a great fan of low-tech options as well, because then you can also see that everyone is contributing. There's no kind of hiding away from that. So it's anonymous, but we know that you're doing it. More WhatsApp interaction, specifically an ideas WhatsApp. Again, I love like using the technology for that. But if you put a question out there in your WhatsApp chat and then the first person responds, how do you make sure that everyone's voice isn't anchored around that first one? So it could be that you encourage people to WhatsApp you separately rather than a team one. Things like Wisp form that I shared with you before that people can do anonymously, and it's free. I use it for a lot of my feedback for workshops, and you can just set it up with questions and say, give your ideas here, collates it on a spreadsheet, job done. We do fortnightly retros where everyone has the opportunity to say what they're happy about, sad about, and confused about, and then we set goals on them. Again, I love that. And I love that it's not just what are we doing really well, like actually what's not working so well as well. And my question is, what if I'm the first person to say what I'm happy about or not happy about? So I don't know if you do this in order, but potentially if you go happy, sad, then confused, if someone goes, I'm really happy about this project, I feel we really nailed it, potentially an undersharer isn't going to say, I'm actually really confused about how that worked, or I'm actually sad because I didn't feel that I got to contribute that, because the voice is going to be anchored around that person who shared what they were really happy about. Or even if you start with, I'm really, like someone shares what they're confused about, but my happy is that it was really working for me, but now I feel like an idiot because now I'm confused because you were confused. I really look up to you. Your voice has anchored the conversation. And now I'm worried that I should have been confused and I'm not. So now I'm not going to share genuinely what I'm happy about. So when you do that, how can you make sure you're capturing everyone's voices in there and that you've not got those key kind of anchor points in there? I love the setting goals on them, by the way, like not just sharing, but this is great. This is what we've shared. And one of my favorite questions, now what? So we've got these ideas, now what? My question to you from, spending the time that we've had together today will be a now what question. So we've talked about psychological safety, we've talked about rules of engagement, we've talked about voice share, etc. Now what? Or if you prefer, so what? More brainstorming when no idea is a bad idea, yes, but not everyone truly believes that. I have wonderful ideas. I also have some really dumb ideas. I've got better at learning to share what I think my dumb ideas are because I know it triggers off thoughts in other people, but I know not everyone does the same. So when no idea is a bad idea, how do you get everyone to still share that? Box idea. Yeah, I love the box idea. Yeah, that anchoring thing is tough. And again, it can vary between what the meeting is. Like in your own teams, you'll probably have different anchors in brainstorming meetings, from problem solving meetings, from feedback meetings, whatever that looks like, because different people will have different preferences. And group members naturally look up to other group members for different strengths. So being really aware of that. Maybe write down all the ideas by themselves and then share them. I think that's my new favorite way of brainstorming. Even if you're in a group and you want people to speak, so let's say we can't have a box on the table idea, going around the room and saying, before we share anything, I'm going to give you 3 minutes, whatever time frame you want to have. Here's a piece of paper, because there'll always be someone without one. Here's a piece of paper. I want you to write down all your ideas. Go. And they'll write them down and then say, you can either take the paper off them or say, I want you to share every single thing you've got written down there, or get them to pass it to the person next to them so someone else is sharing it for them, because then everyone's idea has still been captured. And if they're self-conscious about reading it out, someone else can read it for them. So just different ways of playing with it. I feel like this is an area that kind of takes intention of doing. And it feels like a lot when you're thinking about it, because you're like, hang on a minute, that's still going to have someone anchoring the conversation. That's still going to have someone anchoring in. But I think once you start to do that with your teams and you like explain why, like talk about the concept of voice share with them, they'll come up with their own ideas too. If you give them space, it will have a voice share in order to be able to share their thoughts about how that could work. Yeah, mix them up, write down the ideas by themselves, share them. Great idea. Mix them up and then read out by different people. So yeah, I feel that works really well. All right, the final area, and we already had this mentioned briefly, is on accountability and ownership. So if we're building exceptional teams, building phenomenal teams, building high-performing teams, building teams that we want to work in, although I've put this last, this is one of my it's one of my non-negotiables actually in pretty much everything I do. So any workshops I run, it's a non-negotiable. Any teamwork that I'm doing, it's a non-negotiable. And it's something I work hard on holding as a non-negotiable, so a standard for myself as well. So we're talking about taking accountability and ownership. Now, I'm going to make a bold statement. I genuinely believe that this is one model that can help you to shift your culture overnight. So if you currently have a team culture where there might be a lot of blame, where you're struggling to get people to take responsibility, I believe when this model is implemented in a team, if everyone's on board, it can shift your culture overnight. Now, I realize that's a really bold statement to make, and hopefully you'll be on board with that with me in the end. But the other thing I'll share about this model is if you have children, if you have teenagers, if you have partners, doesn't work with pets because they don't get it. If you have friendship group dynamics that can be a bit weird, if you work in volunteer teams, whatever it looks like, this model works really well. I'm going to get your management team to watch it, it's gold. This model works really well. So we have a line in the middle. Some of you may have heard of this, it's above and below the line. So naturally there is a line in the middle. And this is what we refer to as our line of choice. So think about it in this way. I'm going to talk to you as individuals, and then we'll talk about this in the team concept. Because you can't have team accountability if individuals aren't taking accountability. So we have our line of choice. Any given time, any situation that happens in your life, you have a choice. You have a choice about what you do with what just happened to you. Now, I'm going to put a really important caveat in here before I explain the model more. I fully appreciate and fully understand that really bad things happen to people, and that there's people who may be listening to this who've had really negative personal life experiences. And I want to be really clear that what I am not saying here is that you are responsible for the bad things that happen to you. That is not true. So to reiterate, in case you blinked or ear blinked in that, you are not responsible for the bad things that happen to you. What you are responsible for is what you do now. So this is where that line of choice comes in. You didn't choose for bad stuff to happen. but you get to choose what happens now. And I wanted to point that out at the start, because often before I used to caveat this at the beginning, I'd get people coming up to me afterwards and going, does that mean I'm responsible for X, Y, and bad thing that happened to me? Absolutely not. Let's put it into a work context. If you are in an environment where you're being bullied, where you're really struggling to kind of maybe even survive in your workplace, firstly, please seek help and support for it. And if you're unsure where, flick an email to Mandy and Rita. They'll be able to point you in direction of some really good resources. You're not responsible. Let's go with bullying. I've been bullied in a workplace. It was, quite frankly, shit. No one should have to go through bullying in the workplace, and we know that it happens a lot. You are not responsible for the fact that you're being bullied in the workplace. You did not cause this to happen to you. I want to be really clear on that. And what you are responsible for is what you do now. So from this moment, what you do now with that is your responsibility. So how you react to that, the choices that you make from that, how you either choose to internalize or not internalize those experiences, they are 100% in your line of choice. So let's have a look about what that looks like. And I realize that just suddenly dropped into being a bit heavy, but I think it's really important to make sure that's framed up well. So when we're being above the line, we always say, it's one of the things we talk very black and white about. If we're being 100% above the line, we are causing the experiences in our life. Now, that's why I gave you that really clear caveat before. So I'll put it onto me, talk about my experience. So I was bullied quite badly in a job. I actually, and I'll talk about below the line in a second, I actually spent quite a lot of time below the line in that, and actually wasn't taking ownership of my emotional response to it, taking responsibility for taking action, looking at what I might do either internally, leaving the job, whatever that might look like. When I did make that decision, I ended up in Australia. So hello, that was 11.5 years ago. When I did make that decision, and I took ownership for how I was experiencing it and how I was feeling about it, the level perhaps of what I was internalizing about what I was being told about myself, once I switched to taking ownership of that, it's actually one of the most empowering things to be able to do, to switch from being below, which we'll talk about in a minute, to above the line, and to be able to take responsibility, take ownership, and be accountable for our own experiences of life is a really empowering thing to do. And I'm not saying it's simple. So if you're swearing at me on the screen right now, hello, I'm good with it. And that's okay. I'm not saying it's simple. I'm saying it's fully within your choice to be able to do so. Let's think about it for your team for a second. If your team is going through a particular experience or reacting to something in a particular way, how different might it feel if they are choosing to take collective responsibility, to take ownership over a problem that needs solving, and to be accountable for their actions? I don't know about you, but that's the kind of team that I want to work in. So if we know what above the line looks like, what's the flip side of that? And again, I'll put it in the context of my own experience. So for me, when I'm below the line, I can tick these off pretty well. So I'll be blaming everyone except myself, although sometimes that sense of false responsibility, I would also put below the line, because if I'm taking responsibility for something that isn't mine to take responsibility for, I'm actually stopping someone else from being above the line because I'm taking that away from them. So we've got our blame. We might be making excuses. Oh, it's just how I'm wired. I snap at everyone. It's just my personality. I'm really feisty. No, take responsibility for that. We might justify our behaviors. We might justify our actions. So right back at the beginning of this time together, we talked about that quadrant and that apathy. Oh, well, I don't need to do much. It's not a great environment to work. No one pushes me, so I don't need to push myself. Can fall under justification. Whereas if I go, I'm not actually being stretched and challenged in my workplace. Oh, well, it's just the way the workplace is. It's just because Bob's not a great leader. And if someone's called Bob here, I'm really sorry. I'm sure you're nailing it. Don't take it personally. But that can keep me below the line. Whereas if I go, actually, I'm not being stretched, I'm going to go and have a conversation with my team leader about it. Actually, I might look for jobs and apply for new jobs. I might look for opportunities for personal, professional growth and development. The other one that I'd say on here, that bottom one, denial. If you think that you spend your whole life above the line, let me introduce you to the last one. You are fully in denial. So none of us spend our whole time either above or below the line. Some of us have a leaning towards one more than the other, but in your human experience and in your experience of work, you absolutely move between them. Now, please don't put this in the chat and please don't name this in front of other people. I bet if I gave you this and I said, here's all your team members, or list everyone you've ever worked with, do you think are they in the majority above or the majority below the line? You'd be able to pinpoint them based on the behaviors that you see from them. So when I talk about this being something that can shift your culture overnight, it really can. Let's assume for a second, and I hope this isn't true for you, but let's assume for a second you work in a team environment where there's a lot of blaming, there's a lot of making excuses for why we don't get results, or why X, Y, and Z hasn't happened, or COVID did this so we can't, whatever it looks like, or justification of why certain actions or behaviors may go unchallenged. Denial, if you don't think any of it's happening, then you're here. How do we move people to being above the line? I'm going to ask you to share in the chat. I'm going to ask you to jot some thoughts down. And I'm not going to leave you on your own with this. I'll give you some thoughts as well. So just in the chat or on your piece of paper, if you're following along at home as it was, how can we help others move from being below the line to being above the line? Give me some thoughts and shares on that. I'll give you a couple of minutes to jot them down. Yeah, so start with our own behavior and look for a ripple effect. So if I'm demonstrating when I take responsibility, so let's say something goes wrong and I stand up and I say, this is actually my role in it. This is, I can see where I need to take responsibility for something that didn't work. By doing that, we give permission to other people to do that too. So by sharing our vulnerabilities, we enable other people to do that too. I think this is that's a really interesting one when it comes to the concepts we were talking about in voice share. I think as a leader, when something goes wrong, if you stand up first and you demonstrate accountability, ownership and responsibility, that's the kind of voice share that we do want anchored. Because if I stand up and go, actually, this happened, this didn't work, this was my role on it, and this is what I'm going to do, to anchor that as the voice in the room for other people to share and do the same is phenomenal. It's one of the values in your workplace. Love that. Discuss above and below the line behavior and how it's employed within our business. Yeah, hands down, the first thing I would say is if you want to use that model to shift your culture, everyone needs to know what the model is. So I can't go like to my team and talk about above and below the line if I haven't explained it and we haven't nutted out what that looks like for us. So it's very much about crafting a sense of shared language. So yeah, that we treat everyone with equality. Yeah. So if I've given that sense of shared language with teams, and I do this, as I say, with just about every team I've worked with, and I say to them, okay, here's the model. This is what it looks like. Now, what does it look like for us to take this from concept to reality? Then we can have the conversations around there, which means next time when you and I, just pretend there's just the two of us here right now, you and I are having a conversation, all I have to do is say, hey, Bob, we'll just stick with Bob. Bob, I feel like we're having a conversation that's quite below the line right now. What are your thoughts? Like, it takes the emotion out of what you really want to say is, Bob, could you stop blaming everyone else? And it allows you to take responsibility for the frame of the conversation. So then Bob can go, actually, yeah, I agree. I just needed to complain about it. And there's absolutely space and time to do that. Like, we're human. Sometimes we actually just need to have a good rant. Find your safe places to do that, like. And then we can go, actually, yeah, that was a bit below the line. What needs to change? All right, well, what can we take responsibility for in there? So it takes a lot of emotions out of what can sometimes be quite difficult conversations. My other favorite way is questions. So I will argue this till the cows come home. One of the best toolkits you can have as a leader and as a human is the ability to ask really, really good questions. So I just gave you an example there with the conversation of Bob of, hey, Bob, are we having an above or below the line conversation? If Bob is below the line, or I am, we don't want to be told when we're there, right? We don't want to go, you know, Eleanor, just stop blaming everyone. I'm just going to go, well, I'm going to get really defensive about it, potentially, depending on where my emotions are. So having really good questions that we can ask that empower people to have the choice, because it is a line of choice. You can't force someone to be above the line, but to give them the choice to step up above the line in that moment. So let's think about if someone comes to you with a problem in the workplace and they say, oh, this is happening and I can't do it because of this and can't do it because of that. We can ask them a really good question. So we might say, well, I hear your frustration and I hear that that's not working for you and that you feel really annoyed by it. What would it look like if we were to take 100% responsibility and ownership for this problem? What could we do differently? And the change in the language, the change in the field, be that one-on-one or in teams, makes a phenomenal difference. Yeah, someone said, discuss when below the line is acceptable versus unacceptable. Yeah, absolutely. Because sometimes you just can have a good rant. Find those safe people to do it. Now, that comes back to our team values, our standards and expectations. Like, what does this look like for us in reality? So in wrapping up with you, I talked about the 3 different parts of the model that we have. With having a really good Venn diagram, it would be really amiss to not just mention the gaps that are in there as well. So very briefly, we've talked about the philosophy, we talked about culture today and building kind of our team culture by design. If we don't do that and we leave it to default, which is why I've grayed it out, and we only focus on our people and our purpose together, but we don't look about how we make that happen and bring it to life, what we actually end up with is that unrealized team potential. So we have our culture by default, there's no taking initiative, there might be an increased conflict because we haven't talked about how to have healthy conflict, there's no innovation, there's a lack of trust. So this is why that philosophy part is so important to focus on. However, we don't want to neglect any of those areas. Because, for example, if we focus on our people and our philosophy, so we get to know our people really well, we know what makes them tick, we know their strengths, we know perhaps their behavioural styles, all those different things, and we talk about how we get on together, but we neglect that sense of purpose, what you end up with is what I've called a disillusioned social club. So we all get on really well, we know how to get on, we know each other fine, but why the heck are we here? You've really got a social club that doesn't know what it's doing. So you might see here within your teams a lack of drive, a fragile or fleeting morale. There might be a clash between individual why and missions because we haven't nailed like what our sense of purpose is individually and collectively. Remember the bird in the tree? We might see a decreased lack of resilience because we know that purpose is one of the key things in research that gives people a sense of resilience in the workplace. So there's 7 different factors and purpose is one of them. And we might have quite an inward focus because actually if we're just focused on the people that we've got in our business or our teams and the philosophy and what we're doing, but we forget about the purpose, then we're actually looking at ourselves and we're not looking at our customer and having that external focus. And then finally, if we actually forget to look at the people that we have in our team when we're looking at our philosophy and our purpose, we're actually just doing a bit of game playing. And again, this was my words when I was coming up with this model. But to me, if we don't know really who we've got in our team, what makes them tick, what their strengths are, how they prefer to communicate, we can't really build that team culture that we want. We don't really have a collective sense of values because we've not bothered to invite our people into those conversations. So we're effectively ticking the culture box, but we're not really living it. So when I go into teams and people say to me, we always get asked to share our ideas and then nothing ever happens with them. It's a lip service, it's ticking it, it's pretending we want people's input, pretending that we want the voice share, but doing nothing with it. So we end up with a lot of conflict under the surface. It can end up with increase in mental health issues, perhaps for individuals. We find that individuals aren't working to their full potential or that they become a bit of a martyr for the cause, because the purpose, like their why, is so important. They will do anything within those jobs rather than the things that fit them, and have the discussions about what fit really well. So my final question to you as we wrap up, so for reflection, and if you want to share in the chat, you're very welcome to as well, is what are you going to take away? I warned you this question was coming, so no one should be surprised. What are you going to take away from today and implement immediately as a leader? Now, some of you will be able to answer that question straight off the top of your head. Some of you, like me, like a framework to think about such things in. So if you like a framework, play with this. There's 4 things that you can do as a result of the information you've heard and the things that you've jotted down for your own thoughts today. You might have identified something that you know you need to stop doing. You may have identified something that you want to start doing and you want to start to put into place. There may be something you go, yeah, actually, that's okay, but I want to do more of it. It's not a brand new start of something. I do that a little bit, and I actually want to turn up the volume on that and do it a bit more. And conversely, it may be actually, I do that and I don't need to stop doing it altogether, but I want to turn it down a bit more. So I'll just give you a couple of minutes, just jot down your thoughts to yourself. If you don't want to use that model, it's fine. There's literally no pressure to do so. You do you. But what are you going to take away from today and implement immediately as a leader? If you're not the team leader in your team and you are a team member, the question still applies, because remember, anyone can lead. You have influence over the people around you. So I would love you to start getting into the frame of mind that actually, I genuinely believe everyone can be a leader, even without the position title. How are you influencing the people around you? So what are you going to implement immediately? And maybe what do you want to stop, or start, or more or less, or all 4 if you prefer. So I'll give you a couple of minutes. So having a place that everyone can engage, maybe WhatsApp, something like that, an area where everyone can engage in discussions. Stop speaking first to start with. Love that. More reflection on self, more team meetings, implementing anonymous supported chat, less anchoring in meetings. That was profound. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right, we've got to the end of our time, and I want to respect the time that we're all in here now. We have, it's all right, I suddenly went, we have, because of course you're on a different time zone, a lot of you, to where I am, because I'm in sunny Queensland. So I'm going to stop there and wrap up there. But I would encourage you to keep thinking, especially about this last slide. I warned you at the beginning that we were going to cover a lot, and I was going to delve into a lot of different things. Some of you will have looked at it and gone, that's not relevant to me. That is. My strong encouragement is to spend time on here. What is something you're going to take away and implement? We know that if, I think we've probably all been to professional development before, we were like, that was great. Hopefully you think it was great. That was great, or it wasn't, whatever that looks like for you. And then it goes on a shelf and we leave it there and we never do anything again with it. So my strong encouragement is find at least one thing that you want to take away and implement immediately. If you've just found that you've got a list of 10 things, I love that. Now prioritize and do the one thing. Start with one thing, make a difference, have the discussions with your team, and continue to build amazing team cultures around you. But other than that, I shall leave you there. So thank you very much for your time, for your reflections in there as well. And I will leave you there.
Thank you, Eleanor. That was amazing. We got lots and lots out of that. I hope everyone enjoyed it. Yes, like Eleanor said, please go back and listen to the recording. If you haven't, get some different learnings out of it every time you do go back and listen to it. So big encouragement. But thank you, Eleanor. We got lots out of it, and we look forward to seeing more of you.
Beautiful. Thanks, Rita.
All right. Thank you. All right. Bye, everyone.